Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to session 6 of GA4. And today we're taking a look at a second part of explorations. And within this, we'll be going through path exploration, cohort exploration, and also segment overlap. As with the other explorations that we've looked at in previous webinars, you can find all of the different types of explorations here. Some people are a little confused and think that there's only 4 types of exploration that are available. But if you click on the slider here, that will reveal all the other explorations that are available to you. Today, we'll be looking at path exploration, segment overlap, and cohort exploration, which can be accessed just by clicking on each one of these cards here. We'll start off with the path exploration. The 2 columns, variables and tab settings, are pretty similar to the other explorations that we've seen already. We have the name for the exploration there, and of course you can change that, name it to whatever you like. We've got the date selector. We have the segments that are chosen. And in this case, we've just got some pre-filled default built-in segments that have come from the GA4 Google Merchandise Store. We choose the dimensions and the metrics that we want to include in the exploration. And we can see that the technique here is set to path exploration. We can, if we want to, segment this data. So if we just wanted to see US data, then we just drag the segment over there. In the next session, we'll be going into segments in a lot more detail. And you can see here, if you wanted to build your own segment, we can create a user segment, session segment, or event segment here as well. And there are some templates as well, but more in the next webinar for that one. So here we can see I've applied the US segment. You can see that the starting point here, 64,552. If I remove that segment, you can see that there's a lot more sessions now, 102,020 sessions for that event name in this particular case. So segments allow us to filter down the data that's available within a particular exploration in much the same way that it worked in Universal Analytics, where we can apply or compare, if we want to, different segments. We've got here node type, and you can see with node type we have event name, page title and screen, and page title and screen here. So just wait for those to open up a bit. So here we can see we've got unique nodes only. So we can now see for all users, in this case, because we're looking at all users, we've not segmented it, we can see we've got a starting point, step 1 and step 2. And we can see that the value that we're looking for here is event count. So if we wanted to do a breakdown, so if we wanted to dig deeper, we can choose event name, gender, country, or device category. In this case, that it brings from the dimensions. We'll leave that empty for the moment. One of the main reasons that people use path explorations is to track a crowd's journey through a website. Now, GA4 makes this a little bit easier because it is very much focused on an event model rather than page view and event model, and that makes life a bit easier for looking at these events. So the typical examples that people would use this exploration for is to find how people are navigating their way through the in this case website. Now we can see here that we've got the session start event within GA4. We've got quite a few different types of events that are available to us. And one of those great ones is session start. Again, keep referring to this event-based model, and also the GA4 is much more focused on engagement rather than page views, time on site, bounce rate, that sort of thing. It's much more focused on events. So we can see when the session was first started. So this just takes any web session where somebody's come to the website, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they've been there before or won't come afterwards. It's this particular session that we're interested in. And what this now shows us is where people then go after that session start. So we can see here, after session start, people go to a page view. And then from a page view, they go on to view a promotion, or they become a new engaged user because they've met the thresholds for that particular event. Also, we've got new recent active user, and within GA4 we can trigger a number of different events when different criteria are met, and this is quite useful if you want to target people that have become what you might class as a valuable user or an engaged user. There are other things we've got, like predicted top spenders. There's much more we can add in there, and if we just expand this list here, we can see some of the different events that are used in here. And it could be just something as simple as view an item or view an item list, but we can track people then all the way through the path through the checkout or booking system. Once we get to that point, we really start to narrow down the data. It really goes to very, very small amounts of data. So what you might want to do is, if you're just interested in tracking the path through the first few pages of the website, particularly if it's an e-commerce site, if you want to see where people go from the homepage and then down into the sub pages. If you've got content grouping, you can see how people are navigating around the site in that way. But we will see in the next webinar, we'll be looking very much at the debug view, which allows us to see individual users' journey. But the path exploration allows us to see that data aggregated, and it's much more useful because if we start to put in things like conversion rate optimization, and we're making significant changes to navigation or the content or design of a page, we can see what kind of an impact that has using this type of exploration. If we just fiddle around here, and if I was to choose breakdown for event name, then we can see that we've got page title and screen name class there, or we can just choose event name. And then we can see all of these different events that occurred afterwards. And we've got some of the common ones here: view item list, view item. And if I was to click onto view item list, then it takes us further down this path. So if we were to look after view item list, then when you go into view item, we can see it creates another step for us there. So we can see all the way through from this view item or page view item. We can see that go all the way back to view item list and right back to the beginning at session start. So we can either choose to work back or forwards. We can see where people are going, or we can see where people have come from. So it's very, very useful. I find it particularly useful for information sites where you might want to test different imagery to entice people to click on a link, and this allows us to do that. We can tag more as well if you want to tag some of the click events. You can see we've got some click events in here, but if you wanted to label different imagery, if you were doing different tests, then you can use the path exploration. Now we can use the events properly to see which link and which route people went down. We can put filters in here as well. So if we wanted to filter the traffic just to a specific country, then we can do. I just said I wanted the United States traffic. So this is kind of a segmentation, but it's really is in report filtering. But you've got full control over those different ways of filtering out or segmenting the data. So in summary, this report is used mainly for looking at the way that people make their way through the site. We don't tend to look at this exploration for looking at where traffic has come from, because it is very much based on the event model rather than looking at source medium. We can analyze just a particular source medium. You could just have a look at paid traffic, for example, or Google CPC to compare the paths with those people that come in through, let's say, Google Organic or Facebook or something else, and we can see how those paths differ. But primarily, this is a tool for seeing how people navigate their way through the site. Moving on to the next exploration, this is the cohort exploration, and it is probably the least used exploration that's around at the moment. We've had something similar in Universal Analytics, but it really gives us the opportunity to put a pivot table in, if you like. And the example that's given here, I won't spend too long on this because it's a section that people very rarely use, but it allows us to represent the data in a slightly different way. The example in this case is to look at all users and use weekly cohort granularity. So we can see here where we've had number of active users that have been in a particular date range, and then as time goes on, as we go into week 1, we can see fewer, and then fewer, and fewer, and fewer, and fewer. So it's trying to highlight the drop-offs in users. So fairly obvious one in this case, but this tool can be used if you've got the type of business that you've got regular customers that come back and purchase from you every few weeks or every few months. Then you can use this report to or this exploration to see where that is happening and how long it is to help you drive campaigns that target those audiences or different people as they get closer to that. So as you can see, as people in this case become inactive or users become inactive, we can then target the people that have been inactive as an audience, and we can push different messaging through digital advertising out to those people as well. So fairly fairly unused exploration. It was quite unused in Universal Analytics, but it does have its place. I'm not going to go into really fine detail in this case. If any of you've got any particular cases where you would like to use this exploration struggling, then please let me know. I'm quite happy to guide you through that. But most of the time you'll find that there are other explorations that will do the job. And when we start looking in the next webinar at creating our own blank explorations, then you'll find much better ways to visualize your data. And then the final exploration that we're looking at today is something called segment overlap. And this has become much more useful in GA4 because of the different attribution model that is available to us and the improved way in which GA4 manages to bind mobile traffic, tablet traffic, desktop traffic, all of that different types of traffic are much easier to visualize here. So what we can see in this case, so segment overlap, same sort of thing. We can choose the segments that we want to use in here, the dimensions and the metrics, nothing different in that case. But then we can do the segment comparison. So we might want to, probably won't use the age segmentation in this because this particular data set isn't particularly great at that. But we can see now segment comparisons, mobile traffic, tablet traffic here, and we're using active users here. But what we might do is, let's say, add sessions instead, just to give us a little bit more interesting data to look at. So we can start to see this data a little bit differently here. And if we now select this as device category, you can see the data represented very slightly differently here. So what we're looking for in this case is where you've got mobile traffic only, tablet traffic only, and mobile and tablet traffic. And you can see in this case the overlap is so small you can barely see it in this particular data set. In your own data sets, you're probably going to see much better data. And what can be very useful here is if you want to see the relationship between the desktop, mobile, and tablet traffic. And Liam's just asked a question here: is there any way to see data with revenue included? One of the things that sometimes people struggle with in GA4 is actually getting the right combinations of revenue or of metrics to dimensions in there. So in this case, you can see that we've got transactions. And if I was to see if I can just add, just going to take Metrics Explorer. So if I wanted to look at e-commerce, I will take a look at purchase revenue. And then we'll drag that over into the values column there as well. And just take that out. So now we can see wait for it to render. We can now see the revenue that's coming through there. This is not a particularly interesting data set, but what we can see here is we've got mobile and tablet traffic. No revenue has been generated there, and this one where we've is essentially just all tablet traffic or tablet only traffic. What we're looking for with these kind of reports, particularly if we're looking at revenue, is how the mobile and the desktop traffic in the main work together. So do people do their research on mobile first and then go through and purchase on a tablet or purchase on desktop? That's often what people are looking for here, and we can start to visualize that in here. This particular data set is not great. It's just the demo account. Unfortunately, we can't use our live customers data, but what we tend to do with this is look for different demographics. Often we'll map the different demographics here, and then we'll see what revenue is coming from those different demographics. And if there's an overlap between age and gender, for example, or if there is an overlap between geographic location and age range, and that information can be quite useful, because we can then see what combinations we need to look for, which produce better revenue. And in fact, often we don't look at revenue, we tend to look at the conversion rate, because we might be not targeting the best combination of demographic, but we might find an overlap between a specific gender or age range that has got a much better conversion rate. And if we see that better conversion rate, then we can go and target those people with digital advertising, and go and target that overlap that works really well. And that's where I tend to use this, rather than looking at mobile and tablet traffic, which it can be useful if you want to, if you've got a very good method of targeting people throughout the whole conversion funnel, but most people don't have the time to build campaigns around that. But people do have the time to go and focus on targeting a specific age range, or a specific gender, or a specific geographic location. And in this case, we can see the overlap in the traffic that allows us to target those. So that is really where I think this exploration does a great job. And it's just, because GA4 does a much better job of looking at the user, rather than individual devices and sessions, and not binding the users together. This is not only a better tool for targeting those people, but it's also got more detail, and with that detail we get much more reach. We can get out to a lot more people and build audiences with more people, because we've got better quality data in this case. So that's there is another part of GA4, particularly when it comes to digital advertising, and specifically for audiences within Google Ads. In some sensitive industries, healthcare, medicine, financial services, and some products like alcohol, that are quite difficult to set up audiences within Google Ads. Still, within GA4 we can create those audiences. We might not label them as people that are buying bottles of whiskey, but we can create an audience on what Google would class as a sensitive audience, and then we can go and remarket to those people, or we can go and target those people, or target similar audiences in that respect. So again, I would use GA4 to build those audiences, and then use Google Ads to go and target people based on those audiences. So that's pretty much it for today. This is just really a good overview and introduction to the segment overlap exploration, the path exploration, and the cohort exploration. In the next session, we'll be taking a look at user lifetime, just very briefly, and then we'll be going straight into creating an exploration from scratch, a blank exploration. And this is really what most people do when we're providing these webinars and training sessions. What we tend to do is give people an overview, first of all, of what's available, because then when we come to build our own blank explorations, we'll understand what each of the settings relates to, and how that can be built. Moving on from that, just about to set the dates for the for the next webinars, and we'll be looking at some very specific industry examples. We'll be taking a look at e-commerce, we'll be taking a look at tourism, hospitality, and a few others, and run dedicated sessions for each one of those. We've just got a question in from Liam. Would it be possible to show Universal Analytics report and how to build that in GA4 if it's possible? Yeah, really good question, Liam. In terms of migrating reports from Universal Analytics is a very good very good point. Yeah, what I think I'll do as a separate session is take a look at custom reports, saved reports that people have in Universal Analytics, and how you migrate those over to GA4. Now, there are some differences in the way that the data is mapped internally in GA4 to Universal Analytics. So yeah, there are some difficulties. We've come across just this back end of last week, actually, one of the limitations with showing bounce rate in some reports, particularly for imported Google Ads data. But certainly I'll run a session on how to get a Universal Analytics report and build that in GA4. I think that's what you're asking for there, Liam, is how we go about doing that. And it's a big part of that migration away from Universal Analytics, and it's something that I'd not included, and I'll probably put that in for a week on Monday instead of doing some of the industry specific ones. I think that's a good one to put in, so I'll get that in there. Okay. Right, I think that is it. Got a couple of other questions that come in, which we'll take offline. But other than that, thanks very much for watching. Look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thanks very much.